Hello and welcome to this episode of For Your Journey. Staying with our socially distant format here during this time, we wanted to continue the series that was started a couple of years ago now. Actually, we've had in the Giving Is series. We have these outlined on our website as well, and we've done For Your Journey is about giving is love, and giving is faith, and giving is joy, and giving is mission. And now the fifth one in the series, giving is sacrifice. That was also part of the articles that were in the spring vision newsletter that just came out a couple of weeks ago. And now we wanted to open that up for conversation, how it means that giving is sacrifice, what that means.
Yeah, it's maybe worthwhile to note that we started that a few years ago as a teaching about giving, um, rather than just speaking, quite frankly, about offering and how we should offer and to support the church and that's in our obligation and so on. We discussed and felt it would be better to talk about this. We could call it a spiritual discipline, even though the word discipline sounds strong and obligatory. It isn't that at all. It's really a work that we have watched in Jesus Christ. He has been the example of giving. He came to this earth, he taught us, and he gave his life as a sacrifice freely, and he opened the way of salvation for us freely. And so in response to that, there's this feeling of a Christian to give, to do something in response, and giving is part of that response.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about the word sacrifice, of course, that always implies to give up something. Sacrifice is not just a convenient thing to do or when it fits. Sacrifice means you actually give something of yourself, your time, your effort, your money, your resources, as a feeling to show love and to show thankfulness to the Almighty God that He's included us, that we are part of Him. His life is in us. We're His children.
Mm-hmm. If continuing with that theme there, like if you're giving something up for the purpose of love, like at what point does it ever become not a sacrifice? You know, like if I am giving something up for my friend because they're my friend and I love them and whatever, is it still a sacrifice, or is it just me being friendly? You know, like, or is it only a sacrifice if like I don't want to do it? You know, or is there a line there, or what's the difference?
Well, I think that's really interesting because that shows the negative connotation to the word sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
It is a sacrifice, but you do it in love. So it's just like we sing in many of our hymns, the loss, no loss for gain is mine. So you did have a loss, but you don't see it as a loss. You see it as a gain because of the love you feel and the connection you feel with the one who you sacrificed for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Often when talking about sacrifice, either in a service or in like a Sunday school lesson or something, usually the Good Samaritan comes up as one that kind of gave and sacrificed to help somebody, you know, and contrasting with people that wouldn't make that sacrifice for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason, you know.
And in particular on the Good Samaritan, there's so many things to learn from that beautiful parable that Jesus made. Um, but one of the nice parts for me is there was absolutely no consideration or no feeling that he did it for a reward.
Hmm.
He was, first of all, Jesus used the idea of a Samaritan who was the suppressed people, the people that were looked down upon to start with. And then he did all of those things, took care of him, put him on his donkey, take him to the inn, gave extra money, said, I'll come back if it costs more, all of those things with no anticipation of any reward whatsoever. Jesus was showing a true feeling of a one who sacrifices and loves their neighbor, because that's what started the whole parable when one of the Pharisees, I believe it was, asked, who's my neighbor? And then he said, this story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it seems like willingness is really the key there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Freely giving.
Yeah.
That's really what has to be behind it.
Yeah. touching on a Bible verse that mentions sacrifice. It's kind of another popular one, just like the Good Samaritan's a popular example of sacrifice. Apostle Paul writes in Romans 12, he's chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. He says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. I know another translation there at the end says, present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your true form of worship, or something. It mentions about that too, which is interesting, that sacrifice could be an element of worship, again, also tied to the authenticity of willingness there.
And your relationship with God. Another aspect of this too is there's no comparison. When one truly sacrifices out of love, or gives out of, and the giving is, and they willingly sacrifice, they never compare. They never say, well, somebody else did less than me, or somebody else did more than me. It's this feeling, like the Apostle Paul says, it's a living, we live to do it. We live to do it, and it's only our response back to God for his love towards us. And that shows how worship always implies that we see his worth, the worth of what it means to be a child of God, the worth of salvation. We are always in debt, and we want to give something to show we appreciate, God, that you loved us.
Yeah.
And so we don't even consider reward. We don't consider comparing anything with anyone else. We simply we do it. And that's what giving is. Giving, it yields the joy. It yields all those other things that we've talked about. And yes, it's a sacrifice, but it's a joyful sacrifice to do it. And it's not even considered one by the time we're done, because it was our joy to do it.
Yeah. When you talk about comparing, especially with other people, like comparing what they give or what they don't give, or what you give in relation to that, I heard, and I don't know where it's attributed to, but it's not biblical. It's just a nice thought that, God doesn't look at what we give, he looks at what we keep. And I thought that was interesting, because it's like, really, when we should compare really only with ourselves and our own understanding. That's what we should be comparing against. Is if I'm understanding more and more the value of love, and the value of the sacrifice, and the value of the relationship with God, he doesn't compare what we give, he looks at what we keep. I thought that was an interesting perspective of it.
Oh, it's nice, because we can even look at that in the sense of the 2 mites of the widow in the offering box that Jesus commented on. She kept nothing for herself.
Yeah.
She relied on God. It links into so many beautiful things in our faith, because she believed God will give me my daily bread. So I don't have to keep nothing for that. I rely and trust on him implicitly. And so I can give to say, I'm so thankful.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you for some clarity on that, and for hopefully some motivation to us to kind of internalize and understand what it means to sacrifice, how we're sacrificing. So thank you for joining us on this episode of For Your Journey. If you have any suggested questions or topics for future discussion, you can find us on Facebook or Twitter. And this has been For Your Journey.